Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I know John Radford has to step out briefly at 11:30. So hopefully we can get through a lot of this. Appreciate everybody's efforts to get here on a nice chilly cold day. Today, I'll kind of give you a brief interview or overview of what we're going to be discussing and how we'd like to proceed during this meeting. We anticipate, after we started putting the agenda together and looked at some of the things on the agenda, that this may need to be a two-part meeting. And I will explain why we feel that way so that we can accomplish the goals that we're outlining. But we've got 4 agenda items. The first one is introductions. That's pretty self-explanatory. What we'd like to do is kind of get to know each other as neighbors. I mean, because that's kind of who we are. I've had several neighbors on the city council. One I drive by on my way to get my big drink at Sunnyside Maverick every
We're
day.
only a block apart.
Yeah.
Or 2.
Roger may not know, we're only like 2 blocks apart.
Yeah. Because he's
Other
on a
side.
couple blocks from me.
Tom and Dee Whittier, and anyway, Ida. So, but what we'd like to do is go around and give an introduction so we can kind of learn more about each other as neighbors, not what you'd see on a door hanger, because I think we've all put that information out. It's out there in campaigns and stuff. But, maybe if we get to know a little bit about backgrounds, that sometimes helps, experience. And maybe for fun, just 1 or 2 things about you or your experience that may shock people in the past, something that you don't think anybody's aware of. So I'll give you an example of that. I'll start. I think I know almost everybody except Lisa, and I know you, some of your family
Yes.
quite well.
Yeah.
All the Burtenshaws used to live abroad down there, and had my niece is married to Porter.
Yes. I
Yeah,
know
he was
that. So
campaigning
great.
for you. So that's when I remembered, oh yeah. So anyway, been lifelong resident, grew up in Iona. Back when Iona was 20 minutes away from Idaho Falls Country Club Mall. Things have changed an awful lot on that. Went to Bonneville, graduated from BYU, secondary education, taught at the Votech for a while. Had several businesses. I also built missiles, Dicol, for a while. But then we've been involved in several different businesses. Brought up on a dry farm east of Idaho Falls. Got 4 kids. 3 of them are still with us, and 3 grandkids right now. I have a very talented family. I had to marry that to get the musical talent because I don't have that. Probably the one thing that surprises people is, I've always done several different business ventures. One, when I was going to BYU, came home on a summer, and we brought one of the first discotheques to Idaho. Which more people hate me for that than politics. For doing that. It was Papa Luigi's down across from some of you may be old enough to remember that. But, and I was also the Ricks College foosball champion for 2 years. So those are dubious honors.
That helped your GPA, didn't it?
It did. I still got good grades.
The competitive nature.
Yeah. So anyway, probably clockwise, save the best for last over here.
I'd rather tell stories about Jim.
You're welcome to help us to get to know your
We
neighbor
love
also.
fire department stories that go way back.
Yeah.
Well, the most astounding thing I learned about Jim was that when he was in college, he sailed a really nice sailboat. They're down to the Caribbean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I lived on a boat for a year.
It's like, okay, that's close quarters.
Fraternity brother.
Yeah.
2 fraternity
And a
brothers.
volleyball.
Yeah.
No, we didn't take the
Named
volleyball.
Wilson?
That was before that.
Wilson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just watched that movie the other day.
So I grew up, moved here when I was 5 from Oregon. Grew up in Copeland. A bunch of Buchhofers and Johnsons and Taylors, and we didn't have any of those. But went to Fairview, which was 4 rooms at the time, and then to UConn, and then graduated from Bonneville High School. And my experience with the guys who played foosball in high school was that was the hive, and you had to smoke marijuana to go in at lunch and play foosball. So we're not gonna go there.
The rest of the story.
There weren't any smoking rooms at risk.
So some of us worked on our frisbee skills instead of our foosball skills. But, went to Scotland for a couple of years and joined the police department. Fire department. Was the coroner for 11 years. That was a whole different aspect of our society. The opioid thing is a real passion of mine. See the front page of the paper. The cancer is back. It's maybe time for some more treatment. Got to spend a couple of years in Eastern Russia and came home re-enthused about democracy and learning to get all of our citizens involved in what we're doing in our government across the board, so that we can maintain the freedoms that we have. There you go.
So
Hand off.
I'll pick up where you kind of left off, because John and I working together, we were hired the same day at the fire department, and we went through our careers together. So
Oh,
Met in
wow.
class
Yeah,
together.
there were
We've
3 of us
stuck
that
each
were hired
other with
together.
unnumbered needles.
yeah, we followed each other around we never got to work together, because when you're hired at the same time as people, you always end up on different platoons. So we never really worked together until you became a division chief. Yeah. Then I was a captain. I was born here. And you know, we have a long family history. My grandfather came to Idaho Falls, and she's like 1906 or something like that. He moved here with the railroad originally. He had a degree in forestry, but he ended up being an insurance salesman. So he's the one that Freeman Park's named after. And my dad always took exception to that, because he's the one that basically was on the council when that park was built. And it was named for my grandfather. And my dad and my grandfather always my dad always was very competitive with grandpa. So he and I weren't like that, but I got to know them both very well. I went to University of Idaho, was a Fiji up there. But before that time, here's my unknown fact, maybe, is the first time that Idaho Falls ever beat Skyline in football. After they lost 7 straight years, the first 7 years, and they were not favored in any of those. Skyline was never favored in any of those games. The first year that Idaho Falls was the least favored team, I think, was when I was a senior in high school, and we beat Skyline for the first time. I was a quarterback of that football team.
What year was that?
1973. Yeah.
Youngster.
I have 2 sons, and they're both married and have families, and I have 4 grandsons. One of my sons lives in the Boise area, and the other one lives here, and we spend a lot of time with that group. We watch their kids a lot for them and stuff. As a matter of fact, my wife's watching 2 of the kids today. Like John said, I went on a long sailboat trip many years ago with a fraternity brother of mine. I was a member of the Phi Gamma Delta fraternity when I was in Idaho. Still am. I still have contact with those guys, and you know, through my career, I worked in advertising for a while. I was a graphic designer, and this is before we did computers, so we drew everything. Another unknown fact is that I designed the Papa Tom's Pizza logo years ago and named the restaurant. Yeah. Tom came to me and knew that I was doing graphics work and asked me if I could do him a logo. And I said, well, what do you call the place? And he says, Tom's Pizza. I said, no, that's not Italian. I'm at Papa Tom's. And he bid on it and said yes. And so I went and drew their logo, took it in on a Friday. He wasn't there. Came back on Monday and they had the menus printed. And it was like rough. It was a rough draft, but it's still in use today. So
That's cool.
yeah. So anyway, been on the council now. I just got reelected, you know, and I'm really happy to be here. And I'm involved with Public Works heavily, chair of the BMPO for a little bit longer, I think. I'm a power liaison. Yeah, I guess that's what I got.
All right, my name is John Radford, and you guys all knew my cousin, you get to know him. But little known fact, I never met him until I was in public service. Like we had never even met. But we both played basketball at Rigby. So I knew of him as a young man because this Radford name, when I played basketball at Rigby, was already known when I showed up. And so that was kind of interesting. The thing about me that is pretty clear to this group is that I'm endlessly curious and reading and learning, right? That it's always something that I'm passionate about. And so that's would be not unrecognizable to my friends in high school because I was not a reader, nor was I an academic in any way. And so 25 years selling books made that curiosity kind of peak, and I've had a really amazing opportunity to learn and learn a diversity of things. So I value that immensely. One thing that people probably wouldn't know about me is that I know more ballet terms than anyone would want to know in my demographic. My wife teaches ballet. My daughter was a ballerina for her whole career. And then I helped lay the Marley floors and do all the things for the ballet in Rexburg that my wife's sister owns. They own a ballet studio in Rexburg. And they have 200 little girls that they get to know. And it's just so intriguing to watch young women become little girls become young women and see their confidence and their athletic ability in terms of ballet. Pretty fun for me. And the other thing that happened recently for me is I had a career change. Just I had 25 years in retail. And that's probably one other thing that people don't know about me is that I was raised in auto parts stores. My dad owned the Napa Auto Parts stores in this area, Rigby, Idaho Falls, and so it also informed my driving skills, which is not a positive because those parts chasers, the people that it used to be, you had every garage in Idaho Falls, you had to deliver the parts to them. And so the families, we would be the ones who would run those parts back and forth, even out to the farms often, right?
We bought a lot of parts.
Yeah. And you got to know where these shops were, but the bad thing was you weren't a very good driver at the end of that. You were going every day. So that's me.
I thought your dad had a piece of a dry clean.
It's kind of interesting because I think he was into that when you met him, but I don't think that it was never part of really my life, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
All right. So I have been, playing with paper, and so I'm trying to get centered here. I have 4 children. My oldest was born in the Bay Area. My second and third were born in Phoenix, and then my fourth was born here. But they all pretty much got their education here. We moved here when my oldest had just turned 8, and or right before he was turning 8. He had 2 8-year-old birthday parties, one in Phoenix and one here. And so for a long time in my adult life, I defined myself as being my kid's mom, and got involved in volunteering in schools, mostly at Westside Elementary. And that led to being involved with the PTO, which led to the book fair. And I followed in the heels of Darrell Snyder. Darrell also lives in the Milburn neighborhood that I live in. And Darrell went on to go from PTO straight to the Ed Foundation. And so I started working with the Ed Foundation and took over as chair after she did for a couple of years, and stayed on the foundation for about 10 years. But I there met Jared Berman, and that's how I got involved with understanding a little bit more about city government. And so I volunteered with his campaign because at the time he was a school board member, and then ran for mayor. And I worked on both of his campaigns. And so that's sort of how I got more involved in government rather than just in schools and volunteering. Something you don't know about me perhaps would be that my parents were met because my mom joined the training class that my dad had graduated from at the Arthur Murray Dance Studio in Tucson, Arizona. And they got involved in ballroom dance and pulled my uncle Ronnie into it. My uncle went on to go from just teaching lessons and working in the dance business to becoming a professional, and he was a competitor. And so ballroom dance was in our family's blood. And so I was on the BYU ballroom dance team, and just really wish that when you went someplace that you would find people who just knew how to dance and would just get out there and cha-cha or waltz or foxtrot or tango with you, but it doesn't happen. And so there are only, this many people who know how to do that, and they're not, you have to take a specialized class at a university in order to find them, or ballroom or dance business where mostly everybody there is retired and spending their money on dance lessons. But so I wish that could be a thing. But I like to dance from when I was a little kid growing up. So the disco era, you were popular to me and would have been popular to me. I would have gone to the place that you opened. And I can do the New York hustle.
Yeah.
And I went to see Saturday Night Fever with my mom late at night. So I love that, all that stuff. So anyway, I think that's enough. On to you.
Well, I'm disappointed that Freeman didn't tell the story about when he met the WSU ladies, girls volleyball team. But maybe he'll come back and tell us that story. Education-wise, I went to St. Teresa's Academy in Boise, classmates with Butch Otter. We did a lot of things I'm not going to talk about. I went to Gonzaga for a while, and then they started raising the tuition, so I went and transferred to Idaho State, because when I went to Idaho State, the first semester's tuition was $95. That tells you a little bit about where tuition's gone. And I got a bachelor's kind of in business and economics and those kind of classes, and then I got a master's of arts in kind of psychology, counseling, but the arts meant you could take graduate classes elsewhere that counted towards a degree, and I took them in the business area. Moved to Idaho Falls in 1980. Been on the city council for 18 years. Mel Erickson, West East got me into this, and Ida Hardcastle got me into this business 18 years, and I don't have to run for re-election again, thank goodness. I was appointed by Governor Batt. I was on the drug and alcohol state committee that he set up. This is a long time ago. I was on the workforce council for 8 years and the rehabilitation council for maybe 10 years. Let's see, I've got 4 children. So Texas, Pocatello, Fruit Heights, Utah, and St. George are their locations, and I'm planning on trying to see them. I love to travel. Judy and I travel to Hawaii every year. Got married on the beach in Maui. So that's something you might not know about me. For the last 2 golf seasons, over 250 rounds. So I love golf. Can't think of anything else. I've really enjoyed being on the council. I really have. It's been quite an experience. In fact, when I was working and had a year and a half more planned to work, and when I got on the council, I thought, I can't do both. Oh, so I pulled out a year and a half early, but I still had well over 90, about 94 on the Percy thing, so that didn't bother me. Something you might not know, my first job out of college, I was a child welfare worker in Blackfoot assigned to the Fort Hall Indian Reservation. That was an eye opener. I had a knife thrown at me once by a grandma, and it came pretty close. And if it would have hit me, I might not be here. But that was a tough job, and it taught me, you ought to appreciate what you have. My first wife, Deanne, passed away in 2002. She was she was real well known in the community, and was probably the reason I won the first election, because I was probably an underdog by a long way. So I was running against the Republican establishment. I changed politics. My dad was a Republican or Democrat. He ran Vernon K. Smith's and Alan Durr's campaigns when he ran for governor against Bob Smiley. I can remember as a little boy, Frank Church ate at our house. But I changed politics quite a bit, and then abandoned both parties because I thought it was a free-thinking way to go. So that's kind of who I am.
One thing interesting about Tom that people wouldn't know is that I got to know Tom because he had daily trips to Barnes and Noble while his wife was still working. So he would read a lot. So it was.
I still read a lot. I try to read about 6 books a year. It's not a lot, but I took, in college, I took Evelyn Wood's speed reading because that brought me from slow to medium.
6 books is a lot when you're talking 250 grams.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how that works.
You
Well,
can discover audio.
Yeah, and I walk. I don't ride carts. No carts.
Okay, we probably need to keep moving because we anticipated this to take about a half hour, but I still, you're the unknown here.
I'll go quick. I'm a Mickle, is my maiden name, so I'm a Mickle, but I met, sorry, I
So
met my
you're a
husband.
You're a BYU fan.
I am a BYU
Yeah,
fan,
because your brother.
because my brother played for BYU. So, but I met my husband when we were 15 years old. So I am a Burtenshaw. We were, because we started dating and when we would, he lived in Yukon and we graduated from Bonneville, and for every date that we ever went on, we always had to pull siphon tubes. We always left every dance early. We always left just about everything early so we could go change water. All spring and summer. I mean, like leading formal dances.
Everybody
I
here know what
remember
a siphon tube is.
pull the to pull the tubes, set the dams and pull the tubes, and so they got me
No,
my
see,
own pair of boots.
Mayor's going, no,
No.
don't.
Yeah,
tell
That's
me
a-
about
that's a new
Yeah.
term for me.
It's
Farming related.
farming related, yeah, so you
They're
have to
those
set a dam.
Way to get
in the
water out of
ditch.
the kitchen to the field.
silver
Yeah.
tubes that go
Shovel
over
it.
the ditch,
Yeah, with this thing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
but you have to.
Prime it, right?
Then you have to
Yeah,
get the
and then you have
suction
to
right.
yank them up and over.
So we drag the tubes. So I was not raised on a farm. I was raised in Idaho Falls, but now I'm kind of part of that Burtenshaw Mickle clan. That my dad was an attorney here in town with Holden Kidwell for a lot of years. So that's actually how I first was introduced to the mayor, was through my dad. And
My ex.
yeah, so anyway, I have 4 children. 2 are married, 3 are still in college. My daughter is getting her master's. My 2 sons are still getting undergraduate degrees, and I have a 15-year-old still in high school.
Little known fact about Lisa, is you have a degree in mechanical engineering.
Yeah, I have a degree in mechanical engineering is my studied background.
It was really interesting how the water got. This is
It was really interesting. No, I mean, I didn't like it, really. I was, 17 years old and we were leaving the
Damn.
dance to go. but it was.
Usually guys use better excuses to get girls out.
Yeah. Life on the
I
farm.
think the Burtenshaws came through that hard work. It was in the genes.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
No excuses. I'm sure you've got lots of stories of what that farming was like out
oh, I
there.
thought you were going to say lots of stories about Rod.
Oh, yes, I know. Yes.
Yeah.
So Rod is my father-in-law's
Clyde
brother.
Burtenshaw.
And my husband was raised on that same
Yeah,
farm. the
Clyde Burtenshaw was
County commissioner.
Craig's dad.
And Ryan Mickle is her brother,
Yes.
Yeah.
and he married
football.
my sister-in-law.
Your daughter.
Daughter-in-law.
Daughter-in-laws,
Oh.
yeah.
And
I
Nate
did not
was
know
a-
that.
Yeah. So we've
Nate
got-
was a good football player.
Nate was a football player
Good football.
for
There's
BYU.
a
Good
difference.
football player.
Good football player.
So let's see what you might not know about me. I came to Idaho Falls when I was 4 because my father took a job here at INL. What was then the National Reactor Testing Station. And so I'm only one of 2 people in Idaho Falls that's a Cincinnati Reds fan because I was born in Cincinnati. And I've only met one other person who's a Cincinnati Red fan. In all my teaching career, I met one young man who was a Cincinnati Red fan, and that's it. So there's something unique right there. Also,
Even in the Charlie Hustle years, even. Pete Rose?
yeah, no, so people that knew the players, but
Yeah.
diehard Reds fan, and it's a testing time right now. I can tell you that, but haven't stopped. So anyway, we came here, and so I graduated from Idaho Falls High School in 1966, the last year there was one high school. It took so long to read all the names, they said, we're gonna go to 2 high schools next year, because they were there forever. So that's how they changed that. And some other unique things about me. One of my college jobs was stacking hay in Jackson Hole on the Rafter J Ranch, which is now a development. I can always go by there and I'll be able to tell my granddaughter. Now, I used to work when that was actually a ranch, and we put hay up loose. We didn't bale it. We put it up loose because the bales would freeze in Jackson and no cows couldn't eat it. But all of us stackers, we always said we were working on the right side of the cow. Never had the muck out.
Took me a minute.
That's a dad joke.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then I did start teaching school in Cleveland, Ohio, and kind of a inner city school. Learned a lot, didn't have a knife thing there, but we had some books in the back of the head kind of thing. And then just decided, my wife used to say, you know, your personality changes when we get to Pinedale. And see those mountains, and I just became more optimistic, and so we decided we moved back here. And here I am, taught school at what was then Clary Gale. Well, I started at Owe Bell when it was still a school district school, and taught there 4 years, and then went to Clary Gale teaching 7th grade world history, and then got a job at IF as a transfer. So
What year did you come back and start your teaching?
77, yeah. And I don't know, like, a lot of things happened in my career that were pretty positive for me, but I think I learned so much from the students. I say I was surrounded by some of the most brilliant minds ever, and all I had to do was open it up for them to actually participate and express their ideas. So I wish I'd known a lot more about teaching when I first started my career. I didn't learn enough in education classes, but over time I learned that my job was to try to affirm the students and stop asking questions I knew the answer to and ask questions I didn't know the answer to. And I had a sabbatical in '89, had applied for a grant from the National Endowment for Humanities. It's called the Teacher Scholar Grant. There was one for every state. So I got the Idaho chance to study Chinese history because I wanted to bring something into the class that was non-Western, because I was teaching this world history class and it was really all European, much European, and I didn't know enough about Chinese history. So that's what I did then. Opened a door for me to teach a little bit about comparisons and letting students make up their minds. And that's where I learned to role play, because you could bury your total teacher personality and become something quite different. And as the kids said, like I tried to do a role play of Lincoln versus another John Calhoun about the argument over the Civil War. And the kid said, when you bring somebody else in to do the other side, they don't have a chance because you just bury them. So I said, I got to learn how to do this, play both sides. And so I debate myself, so to speak, and try to let the kids make up their own mind what was right and what was wrong. I have one daughter who lives in Seattle, and I just had a grandchild. She's the one I'm taking to see the Rafter J Ranch. That's now a major development in Jackson. Okay.
That's awesome. I can speak sometimes too fast, so yeah, tell me to slow down. So I was born in San Diego. Don't hold that against me, okay? My mom's actually from Swan Valley, but she went kind of California dreaming, sunshine searching for about 2 years and met my father. So I've lived in Texas, I've lived in Nashville, I've lived in many cities in Idaho, but have been here 25 years. I moved here my sophomore year of high school, the last move after someone tried to kidnap me and assaulted me, and I actually escaped. And so did a TED Talk about this. And 3 weeks later, my parents moved us back to Idaho. So I graduated from Hillcrest, actually with the Mickle kids, some of them. Nate was a year older than me, but we took chemistry together, and I was a sophomore and he was a junior. He was very impressed that a sophomore was in the class. I remember that very well, but I was terrible at it. My lifelong dream was actually to become a lawyer. That's all I wanted to do from the time I was in 5th grade. That was my whole career plan, and started studying political science at U of I. And after my first semester, which by the way, straight A's, don't let me scare you, but the advisor said, I really think you're going to hate this as a career. You're just way too outgoing. And I just don't see this fitting into what's going to really make you happy. So would you consider marketing? And so I switched and ended up graduating with a degree in advertising with an emphasis in marketing from U of I. My first job was actually as a sample girl at Warehouse. Do you guys remember the prior Winco? And I was Waremarts, thank you. And I moved here and was, kind of, living through trauma, very shy, and nothing forces you out of your shell. I know, can you imagine? Than putting on a hairnet, trying to sell sour cream at Waremark. And that's exactly what I did. And it really actually helped me develop a personality and the ability to talk to people, which is, again, I think what has made marketing a lot of fun. And so I have 4 kids, 3 boys, 1 girl. I say that I'm truly a mother by choice because I have 1 biological child, I have 2 adopted children, and 1 stepchild. So I've kind of seen all sides of the journey of motherhood. And when I ran for city council, one of the things I was really passionate about was having representation from someone who actually had children in school and were sort of living in the thick of the community of the service, the kids, the running around town, all of those things. I owned a small business at the time. There wasn't representation for that either. And so I guess I really wanted to sort of bring something different to the table. I taught marketing at CEI for a time and have taught a lot of private courses. Been very passionate about that. But really, my goal is to live a life of service. I say you're either a person who wants to serve or you're a person who doesn't serve at all. And I'm the president of Data Falls Civitans. I regularly focus my time and energy on food insecurity. So I do anything I can for Community Food Basket. I started cooking recently at the Rescue Mission, which I love because I kick everybody out and I make the meal for 60 or 80 people. And that's like my Zen time to just really focus. And so I've absolutely loved that, as well as the soup kitchen. So I've been working with those organizations at some point in time in my life, pretty much the last 15 years. So I love that. I'm a big Lakers fan. I married a lifelong Lakers fan who was born and raised here, graduated from Bonneville County or Bonneville High School, lifelong Lakers fan. I had to join the pack. So it's been a sad year, but you can always find us talking about basketball because several council members love it like I do. I kind of became the transit person during my entering my 7th year in January on council. I serve as the head liaison to the Idaho Falls Airport, have been working diligently on bringing public transit back to our areas you guys all are aware of for the last 2.5 years. And I served on BMPO for 4 years. And so I never kind of saw my council career going into that transportation area, but it turns out that I do have a passion for it. And it's something that I've kind of developed through that. You said something, John, that kind of really spoke to me. I had a nephew who passed away from a fentanyl overdose almost 3 years ago in San Diego County, which is just exploding there. Things are just out of control. And so opioid issues are something that I have just kind of been privately sort of digging into, and how we can build stronger communities. I serve as a board member on Community Youth in Action, which is some organization that's working really hard to prevent opioid use here. You know, and we were, you know, kind of that all-American family who got hit by it and out of the blue. And so he passed away at 20. So something that I've spent so long working on food insecurity issues that I'm kind of trying to learn more about these issues and how they impact our community now, as it has hit my family. And then lastly, you guys might know that I did some pageantry for a while, served as Mrs. Bonneville County for 2 years, and did some high school pageants as well. Again, kind of teaching me some skills to get out of my shell. I've hung up the banner, and now I coach special needs pageant women and girls who are interested, and I've kind of found kind of a fun little passion there. So, and that's it.
Having daughters that have done that, that's the only place that you can spend $5,000 to get a $300.
That's absolutely right.
Did you debate it, Tim, Kristen?
Did I debate? No, I sang. I'm a singer. I play guitar, play ukulele. I just sang. Yeah. But it would have been fun.
My wife. was
We
a
didn't even
coach.
talk about the band.
Yeah.
I'll try to finish up then. Our grandparents or great grandparents probably knew each other. My great grandfather moved here in 1916 and
So mine
settled.
did. So
Yeah,
they came together.
well, that's probably right. They probably all knew each other, I'm sure. Settled on a farm where the airport is now, and then moved down and built that house there on the corner where the dairy is. And then Lisa, a connection to you, your dad helped me through so many things.
Oh.
Such a good man,
Such a good man.
and it did things for me that, you know, that just really helped me. So I have a lot of respect for him. Farmer my entire life, lived here 63 years. Also done kind of real estate developing or investing through my life to supplement income. And yeah, just thoroughly enjoy Bonneville County and living amongst such good people here in Idaho Falls and in this area. I have 4 children, 15 grandchildren that I just love terribly, and all of them, some that call me grandpa that I love as well. A thing that I don't think anybody knows in this room was I was in a plane wreck on the Idaho Falls Airport in 2010. Had a friend who had a King Air and invited some of us to fly down to a Jazz game. They were playing the Lakers that night in a playoff game. And it was really a late game. We were flying back a little after midnight, and of course, no tower or anything. And he didn't check. He was flying his own plane, didn't check the weather, came into land and had a really strong tailwind. They didn't realize landing south to north. And I remember we were more than halfway down the airport. We were landing at the old Red Baron, so it's a short runway. And when he finally touched wheels, I remember leaning over and looking through the cockpit and thinking, wonder how much runway's past those lights. Well, there isn't any runway past those lights. None at all. Fortunately, there was snow on the ground. It was muddy. It was kind of, early spring. And went off the end of the runway. The front landing gear broke, dropped the nose on the, on the ground. Then a wing hit. We were going pretty fast and spun us around in a 360 when we finally came to a stop. So he did not want that to be in the paper or anybody to know about it. So I went out to my farm and got a tractor and a trailer and drove in. My cousin went to his and got a loader. And we spent the rest of the night, lifted that plane up, put it on a trailer. I towed it into the hangar, and then we hooked the loader on and pushed it into the hangar. And I got home just the sun was coming up. And nobody ever knew except his circles, that the word got around. But that was a fun night. The airport staff just sat there. I don't know if it was security staff or what. There was a pickup parked there watching us all night long. And they just let us do our thing. But that was kind of a fun night. Yeah. Yeah, pulled right out. I felt bad.
What year was
Tracking
that?
mud all over
Early
the
90s?
runway. When I pulled it back in, it was 2010.
Oh, okay, just that.
Yeah. So anyway.
The history of
told your
tractors
dad you were out there
pulling
changing
planes around.
sound too.
Well, I took my wife on a lot of dates changing water. So I understand where you're at.
What is your relationship to Carol Reed?
Carol's my aunt, so
Okay.
my uncle Larry.
Larry, yeah.
is married to Carol.
So they live in our neighborhood, well,
Oh, do they?
for a lot
Carol
of
does
years
now.
before he passed away, but there,
Right.
she still is there. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
right.
So we all come from a generation in Bonneville County where all of the family trees have very few branches.
That's true, and I'm married in just the family thing. My walkers are from Twin Falls. My wife's walkers are Louisville.
Oh,
So mine were homesteading Rockland, hers were homesteading Louisville, and so I'm married into this incredibly huge clan of walkers that scares me. But I'm from the Treasure Valley, so.
okay. Yeah, kind of go through the next three agenda items because so you can understand where we are. The last couple, I think we'll be able to, we're gonna have lunch brought in, so if we go over a little, I hope it's okay.
It's really good.
But it's kind of what we hope to set a pattern for some get-togethers in the future, and we can talk about scheduling and everything in the end. And talking to Bryon, he thought it would be good when we can get together to talk about issues that affect both of us. And some of that is an education purpose, because as we observe some of the issues and problems, concerns that we have, being able to address those by educating. And so what he is asked to do is kind of give us a discussion. And I think, did you pass out the,
I did, and I've got it up on the,
okay.
I didn't print the
Yeah,
slides,
sometimes
but
there's,
I did pass out, you have all the mandated services. Yeah, you do have that.
yeah, one topic of common discussion that comes up is the role of counties and what we do and what's required. Because we're a different type of political subdivision versus municipal corporation, basically. And a lot of the services we do are required. And Bryon, I think, came up with a twist on a summary to make it more understandable of what Seth Craig did with the Association of Counties that shows the legislature what we're required to do. And so when we talk funding issues, a lot of times our hands are kind of tied by the legislature. I think he also contacted Rebecca to come up with the responsibilities so we can understand what your view and vice versa of what the responsibilities of the two different entities are. Hopefully this won't turn into a debate because today's kind of outlining issues, whether they're good things or bad things. These are identifications. This is kind of the statutes on our side, whatever the statutes on your side. We'll have time to identify some of those on issues, hopefully in the future, and discuss some of our differences of opinion. Sometimes I know we deal with things every day that we think everybody else understands, like assessed value, levies, all of those functions that Bryon will point out to that are required. Something that may be helpful that we've mentioned in the past is if there's any interest on the council part to say, for example, to better understand levies and how they're set with the assessed value, have kind of a training meeting, if you want to call it that, or a meeting with the assessor and the clerk. So you understand what they do and their responsibilities. Because there's so many times questions about that. That'll be kind of in the category of topics for potential future But I think, and then moving on to the growth issues, just to be thinking ahead. What I would hope we could do is to understand what I'd like to, maybe quicker than we did, to go around the circle. But just come up with a list of 3 or 4 things that each of us are concerned with that we'd like to maybe get together and discuss, and not debate, but just bring them up so we understand what your concerns are and vice versa. And then the future meeting, hopefully we could get together. We'd like to see it right after the first of the year while the discussions are fresh in our minds, and then come up with, sit down and come up either as a group with a list of city priorities you'd like to see discussed, not priorities, issues, and maybe talk about prioritizing them. And then the counties do the same, either individually, or if you want to do it as an entity, that's fine. That's up to you. And then we could come up with kind of a master list of topics for discussion, hoping that we could maybe schedule a quarterly meeting on a regular basis to alternate one hosted by the city, which would probably be the first meeting after we identified those lists, and then the alternate hosted by the county. And we could either take a common concern or one that we feel like we'd like to bring up. It'd be a good time also to get together and give updates of what's going on. One quick example, I don't know how many of you are aware, this goes back to understanding what the clerk and the assessor does. They changed the law on homeowners exemptions. And now you can apply for a homeowners exemption. It used to be cut off at April 15th. You can apply for that all the way through the end of the year. The thing they didn't anticipate, we've talked to some legislators about, is once all the taxing entities have set their levies, that results in a tax cancellation. That means all of the houses that are built during the year now get the homeowners exemption that we didn't count into assessed value. I did a quick number since this year started 1st of July. There's going to be about $15 million of value estimated. We'll get a report at the end of the year, estimated valuation on the city. So when you set your levy, anticipating that value, you're probably going to come about $115,000 short because they basically claw it back. The county, where we have a broader base, will be about 105,000 school districts, et cetera. But those are the type of things that we'd like to make sure everybody's understanding. So they're not saying, oh, that darn clerk is on here now. So,
You can
so
say
we
that darn
criticize her.
legislator
Yeah.
instead.
You know,
She should have thought about the end result.
She's taking that money
Yeah.
away from us,
Absolutely.
and keep Penny muted so that she can't respond to that. But those are the type of things we'd like to accomplish. So maybe spend 10 or 15 minutes, both of you, and then we'll briefly come up with just a list of concerns and then go home and noodle it around for a while and come back and put a master list together and chart a course forward.
So part of this came about because I, from the time I came into office, I learned of the concern about city address residents that pay a full county tax, right? I mean, it comes up multiple times, and I was actually in the mayor's office the day before Thanksgiving, I think. And this topic came up, and I tried to give her a concise reason, and I realized I couldn't, that I wasn't making a lot of sense. And so I went back to try to make sure I understood it in my mind and to know if there was any maybe even unfairness or you know, why they would be taxed a full tax. And this is what I learned. As Roger said, I think counties really are in many ways a slave to the state, you know, where we perform a lot of those mandated services, excuse me, that the state requires. There's 37 in all mandated services that the county has to apply. And so then I wanted to consider how they're impacted differently, whether you live in the city or you live in a rural address out of the city. And so this is what I came up with. So first I looked at all of the, as I went through them, I kind of put them in 3 different categories. The first one are the state mandated services that are shared equally by all county residents. So it doesn't matter where your address is, you have to have these services provided to you. And so therefore you would have to, you know, be able to share in the
Print these, so they
cost.
have the slides, so they don't have to write them all down.
Yeah, I will print you, or I thought I would email you all a
Yeah, that's
copy
fine.
of
Email's
this.
fine.
So maintain a county law library, district magistrate court operations, mileage and per diem for jurors, fund public health districts, that's a big one. And the state used to pay about 50% of that. Well, as a punishment for Medicaid expansion, the states are now required to pay 100%
Counties.
of public health district funding.
Counties.
Counties, yeah.
Is it state?
Did I say?
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
That's okay,
counties.
if you can work that out.
The counties now fund it all. Public or maintain recorded documents, of course, burial and cremation of unclaimed corpses, driver's license, motor vehicle assessment, equalization of property assessment. It takes a big part of our time for 2 weeks during the summer. Collection of property taxes, coroner inquest, veteran services, mental health holds, university extension services, you know, they do the master gardener and the water metering and all that. It's available for everybody. And emergency communications, which is paid for the 911 fee. Nearly all of the others are paid by property tax. There are some fees, you know, with the driver's license and motor vehicle. So the next group that I thought about was mandated services that have a greater rural load, meaning if you live outside of a city, you're putting more tax, more burden, if you will, on these services and probably need to pay a bigger share of it. Sheriff's patrol officers, rural road maintenance, you know, we've got 1,000 miles out there of county roads. A lot of them are really expensive to maintain, you know, if you get up by Gray's Lake and winter plowing and that. Noxious weeds, maintain and operate a county fairground, used more, I estimated, by rural, just with the 4-H projects and stuff, but certainly they're available to both. Seeding of burned land, we're required to do, pest abatement and land use planning.
Do you get any monies for seeding of burned land, or is that all just has to come from?
I talked with Craig Daniels, did that. He planted junipers. He said about half of it came from property tax dollars and the other half came from a grant that he got through the state. So the next slide, then I looked at the mandated services with a greater city load. Whereas if you're living within a city address, and I just took Idaho Falls and Ammon and put them together because of the density or just a makeup of cities for whatever reason. And the percentage is the percent that has been used of that service by a city address since January of 2020. Public defender, maintain and operate juvenile detention. 90% of those have been from a city address. Misdemeanor probation, civil papers, maintain and operate county jails. That one surprised me. Incarcerations since January 2020, about 83%. Persecution of felonies, search and rescue. Excuse me.
I like persecuting.
Search and rescue, 80%, indigent services, 80%, and public administration, which I don't know if you know what that is. So the treasurer is responsible if someone passes and they do not have anybody to claim in and claim the belongings. The treasurer is responsible to go in, secure all those belongings, identify them, and then distribute them if you can. Try to
Like the
find,
executor of the estate.
like an executive, yeah. And solid waste disposal, which can share it equally for all residential addresses, whether they're city or county, but because of the business is a little larger proportion, probably, you know, I don't know what.
Those are fee-based.
Yeah.
Based on volume.
And that is mostly fee-based. So is what I kind of concluded from this is if I pay $5 in county taxes. And Jim pays $5 in county taxes. You know, $3 or 3.5 of that, for whatever it is used for those services that we all need, no matter where you live. That are just required and have the same burden on them. But that extra dollar that you and I pay will be used in different ways. So yours may be used more to help with some of these items that have a greater burden.
Court particularly. it
Yeah.
looks like, yeah.
My extra dollar would be used for those that burden because of where I live, noxious weeds and, you know, the county roads, the sheriff's law. I just came to realize they're used differently. You can't say that every $5, you know, every dollar out of those $5 of yours and mine's used the same ways. They're not. They're used according to how they're burdened. And then my last slide, somewhat in
Before you
comment.
go on, did you have a question about?
Oh, I just had a question about what's the total population of Idaho Falls and Ammon?
So
Like, is
I've
that
actually got
like
that
80?
on this
Oh.
first slide, and I will email
As a,
all these
like,
to you.
yeah, as a percentage.
So
that you
that's a
can
very
see, like,
good
is
question.
it-
So when you
Bottom of the
combine
slide.
Ammon and Idaho Falls, it's just under 66%.
Okay,
And so, yeah, those
That's-
numbers
that's where
aren't
the
as bad as you would
percentage-
imagine, but that's a very good question.
Well, and one thing on this slide that it kind of points out is your different things that the county is required to deal with, you know, courts,
Yeah.
juvenile, things like that, tend to become more problems in a concentrated urban area than they are. Farmers are spending too much time changing siphon tubes to
Light
kids
fires.
get in trouble.
Light the fires.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, nobody's watching what they're doing illegal.
Take your matches.
So then my last slide is, like I say, somewhat just in jest, but I just realized that counties and cities play different roles, right? We feel like in the county that, you know, we take care of the garbage, and fortunately, cities are able to provide the other more of the humanities, you know, more of a way of life type opportunities for residents. But I'll go ahead and email those to you. Are there other questions that you've got, or?
They have a lot to do with the recreation component, too, don't you, in the county?
Counties?
Yeah.
Not much, really. And our Parks and Recs director is Craig Daniels. And nearly 100% of what he does comes through grants. Very little of
Okay,
that.
because
Or
you
fees.
did the road all the way to Palisades. That wasn't cheap.
The road.
that was done with I can't remember the program, federal program
Oh,
for
okay.
recreation.
You
And
have
we
the
require
boat
that.
docks and the sheriff patrols the boats.
Now, there is some sheriff's costs, yeah, that go into that. Absolutely.
The Sheriff's office is mandated to patrol the waterways.
Yeah.
That's part of their legal requirement. Most of the docks are all grant funded. And the sheriff moves those around for us a lot more because it's easier. Yes, boats are handier than Parks and Rec dragging a boat down to move the docks when they move the docks. But things like the campground at Blacktail and Juniper. Craig has done an incredible job. See, that's all Bureau of Land property that we contract with, and Craig manages that, and it's a self-funded project for the most part. I was shocked with the job he does for making that so self-sufficient, which is why we talked about a joint campground that might operate off a similar out the fairground at Sandy Downs.
It was a good exercise for me to go through them so that
I learned.
when Rebecca and I have a discussion again, I'll be able to comment.
I'm curious about whether or not you, if there's any comparisons between our county and city as others in the state, right? Is there any, you know, or maybe I'm just asking your opinion. I mean, are we the norm, or
What regard?
For what?
us in Bonneville County versus, let's say, Boise and Ada County?
How many cities are there?
Well, just,
No,
yeah,
I'm just curious.
200
200.
or maybe
144.
199.
Yeah.
So you probably got a combination of that 44 and the 200 to, you know, this exercise was good for me because it's when you talk search and rescue, for example, 80%, or what was it?
It was 80%.
Actually, question the sheriff when he said that.
Yeah.
80% of search and rescue calls are city residents.
Yeah, that's
So,
crazy.
you know, it's hard to say,
'Cause
you
they
know,
get lost.
just because you're a county resident or a city resident, you know, it all blends together. And that's where the joint responsibilities of trying to work together on those, you know, because you can't sit up there and say, well, you're from Idaho Falls, so you're only 66%. So, and we've already hit 66%, so we're gonna leave you up there. You know, I mean, that's just not the way government is set up to work. But this was kind of quantifying, I think, which helps.
Is what I plan to do is email all these slides to you, so I'll give an email when we're done.
And if we disagree, you know, on how that is set up or should be used, that makes a good topic of discussion to approach the legislature, because we argue with them all the time about mandated, unfunded mandates like public defense. You know, I mean, that's been a real burden, indigency, things like that. So anyway,
I actually
That's
don't
all I had.
understand why justice is a county function. I think it should be a state function. Just it, period. And
justice.
all, everything
all the courts,
associated
the-
with it.
The prosecutor, and- yeah.
But the discretionary services, looks like there are 10 of those. How many of those does the county participate in? Do you dabble in all of them? Or only some?
Some of them, I didn't include them in there because, I mean, many of them are herd districts. You know, we have
No cost.
hundreds of herd districts, but there's no cost to them. Yeah.
And
Historic.
if you have questions, I did a research project on herd districts and way more than I thought there was to know about herd districts, but
Employment of stenographers. I assume we have those in the courts. But that I'm not sure we'd have to ask Penny.
Well, that's a requirement for court reporters, which we've been trying to say is a state responsibility since I've been here. And we haven't been able to get them to do that. But, I mean, there's some things that are in our circle of concern, but out of our circle of influence. And we try to work on those together, but, you know, they do cost, and it's hard to allocate those specifically, but
Yeah.
the discretionary, the only thing I think that we put in substantial money in is recreation. And most of that, 2/3 of our recreation budget is funded with grants and fees. The property tax part funds some of the employees.
And then of all of the 24 levies, this is such an interesting, puzzle, because once you put all of this together, it's, you guys have very little wiggle room for, much creativity, but of the 24 levies, how many of those levies are maxed out?
Which would be a real good, those sessions we talked about, just sitting down, meeting with the county clerk and understanding how that works. It's complicated. She has a very complicated job. And you can mute me on that because, yeah, Penny isn't used to me giving compliments.
Can I ask a novice question about the sheriff's office? When, how do the other police departments work with the sheriff's office, like Ammon, Iona, Yukon? Do they have their own police force that stood up, or does the Bonneville County Sheriff, do they have a contract with you? How?
They have a contract, and they're working to refine that more and more based on calls for service and cost. Because the sheriff is a statutory law enforcement according to the Constitution, constitutional law enforcement. And they respond all, whether you're in a city, whether you're out of a city, for the same type of calls. Inside cities are municipal organizations that get together and provide a higher level of service. And the sheriff is the highest law enforcement official. He's elected. In cities, it's city police, and the mayor is the head of the city police. That's just because of the concentration and quality of life issues and sirens going off.
Yeah.
Things like that. So that's for a higher level of service. We've had concerns come from some of the smaller cities where we pay county taxes, so the sheriff's obligated to do that. he's obligated to do it at the level of service that he can afford. And you wouldn't have services like code enforcement, like dogs, like patrol, things like that inside of a city unless you went with that. Ammon has chosen to date to contract for those. We're getting that up to closer to a true cost, which, you know, they're growing.
Yeah.
That's a long answer for a short
No,
question.
that was actually a good answer. I was wondering, I just didn't know
Outside of
all of
Ammon,
those.
is it, do you also contract with UConn?
We don't, they have their
Or
own
a police?
part-time officer, but you know, the sheriff will.
We do contract with Iona.
But I own your
We
contract
do
with.
contract with
Okay.
Iona.
Yeah.
The other small cities, I think Irwin and Swan Valley. I think their contract is collecting some
So
of their
that
fees.
contract is more to provide, not a higher level, but just more accurate cost estimate of what their city is actually using.
Well, it's actually a higher level.
Oh, you did.
There's
More
actually
coverage.
with, yeah,
There is a
with
higher
them, and
level.
there's some positions designated.
Oh, okay.
Paid for through that
They actually have a
contract.
building, right? They have a station.
Ammon doesn't, but the sheriff does.
Sheriff
Oh,
has
yeah,
one,
that's what I
right?
mean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's-
yeah, you actually have a sheriff's office in Ammon.
And that was a concept that we worked with the other previous sheriffs to either have one central law enforcement facility or more out of the community.
They have
It
one up in
makes-
Swan Valley or Irwin
Yeah,
as well.
it makes sense in the county because of the geographical spread to have locations
Satellites,
in
yeah.
those areas
Yeah.
with fiber connections and communication and everything. It's becoming better to manage those.
Similar equipment that's needed.
So
Well, and it kind of probably reduces response times too, if you have people
reduces
stationed.
response times for both Ammon, because that's and the unincorporated
Yeah.
area of the county out there.
I went for a ride along last week with our deputies for an afternoon and then a night. And it was really interesting because I was asking them, you know, where their biggest amount of work is. And the answer was by far, hands down, is Ammon. You know, they have one patrol there and one sergeant that takes care of all of that. And they said that's by far where the biggest load is. And then the rural subdivisions, you know, is the next. But one thing I found that I really liked hearing is he talked about the cooperation between Idaho Falls and the sheriff's office. And he said, I mean, because we have on any one shift, we have 5 patrol officers and 1 sergeant. The night I went out, they were short 2. They were covering the whole county with that. And he said that that Idaho Falls works really well with them for coverage sometimes. And they do the same thing for the city, because I was asking them how much they back up the city. But he said, if we're all on the east side and something goes down west, and they know we're over there, because they all know where each other are mostly. He said, we will immediately get one of the city officers to respond and say, hey, you want us to head west until you can get a guy out there. So I thought that was really a credit to Chief Johnson and the way that they are working together.
If I could tag on to what
That, just one second, let me finish my thought. That night, as we had 4 total from the county officers out, there were 9 Idaho Falls PD officers on shift that night. Yeah, I'm all up on the computer, so, you know, which is where the workload is. And then, I'm sorry, John, but if I could just say one more thing. I think it was 76% of incarcerations were city of Idaho Falls address last year. I quizzed that because it seemed really out of place when there was only 7% in Ammon. Is why is because a lot of those arrests are made at the jail by county officers. For whatever reason, they're brought in, they're not arrested yet, and then somehow they get arrested then.
or they're brought in and then they're serving
You
warrant
guys
that
probably
pops
know how
up
that
from,
works, yeah.
you know.
He would.
So that's why
they log
that
them into
number was
the jail.
so high.
Oh, look, we have this other piece of
Yeah.
paper for this thing.
So they're already in,
Yeah.
They're
not in
already
custody,
there,
but
and then
they.
they're
then
arrested.
they
Oh,
are.
So that skewed that number a little bit. So I'm sorry,
Oh,
John. I
no,
cut you off.
and I apologize for interrupting. I was just gonna say, what Brian's talking about and that cooperative effort that law enforcement is showing towards surrounding agencies, whether it's us or they do the same thing for Shelley or Rigby. We know when Rigby had their school shooting, how many resources from all surrounding areas jumped in to help mitigate that problem. When I worked for the police department, it wasn't that way. There was a line in the hallway and you didn't cross that line. Detectives didn't share information back and forth. So you'd have detectives on both sides working a case that would have been solved if they'd have been able to talk together, but politics didn't allow that. And when Sheriff Ackerman went from the city police to the sheriff and the change in some of the other politics involved, and they started that working together and backing each other, and to see how far that's gone 30 years since then is really amazing.
I just want to quickly note that I have had to speak to Sheriff Hulse a couple of times in the last few months, and I've just been really impressed with how quickly he got back to me, how professional he was. We sat in together at a BMPO meeting, and anyway, just been very pleased so far. It's clear he wants to make a relationship and wants to make it work.
Well, out of fairness to the mayor, make sure she has enough time on your presentation. Getting back to kind of the budgetary constraints, the sheriff, talked about having 5 out on patrol. The city has given it. We're constrained by one of those justice fund, the justice fund levy cap. We can only levy 0.00. I can't remember how many zeros, but 2. And out of that, we have to provide all of those other functions that you saw, like public defense, courts. There's a whole list of.
Corner involved in that.
No, I think the court is that was out of general fund. But so you're trying to do that, and jails. I forgot about jails because that's a major expense.
Elections.
So anyway, that, and we can, during the lunch part, if you got more questions about that, but I think we want to turn over and kind of hear the perspective of the city side of things.
I actually think this is a useful roundtable, and I think that it may need to happen every couple of years after elections are held, or maybe every 4 years we actually do a deeper dive, just because there are lots of little tidbits that really make us more effective when we pick them up here. And I do want to say that when Paul Wild ran for sheriff back before, I don't know, 2007, I guess it would be 08, maybe I think it was. They were already collaborating back then. So I think the collaboration between, when you were in the PD before your fire career and now it started, but the collaboration preceded Chief Johnson as well. But I do think that those guys back the blue, right? They back each other no matter who signs their paycheck. All right, so the city of Idaho Falls. I guess I take a tiny bit of exception to this characterization that came out of the ATI, the Associated Taxpayers Conference last week or 2 weeks ago, where they said that they characterized cities as being optional. And I do think that it's clear that with the list you gave us of those 37 mandated by law kinds of things, that counties definitely have things that are mandatory. But cities hardly feel optional when it's just the way life has been as an option for people to live in cities for over 200-300 years in this country. And so it doesn't make sense to me that we're portraying them to taxpayers as optional. But certainly people move into cities, they choose to move into a city. And cities do have a lot of services that they provide. The city of Idaho Falls, I have argued, is, and I did this research last in 2016, so I could be a little off. Things could have changed a bit. But the last time I looked, we are 4th in population size, but we are equal to Boise in terms of the number of departments that we have. And we are the only department or only city that has the combination of assets that we have. So of the 11 departments, and I'll pass this around, but it's a little bit, could you pass one of those to Kathy? The top one. But departments that we have fit into, I guess, four, maybe five, depending on, yeah, four basic categories. But the city of Boise does not provide power. All of our departments are the same, except for they don't have power. And instead of having power, they have something along the lines of culture, history, and art, or something like that. But that makes us, because power is far more, it's less fluffy than culture, history, and art can be for a city. It's very complex department to have. I tell people we're the most complex city in the state. And we're one of, X numbers of small percentage of cities that have an airport, X number of cities that operate power. We're the only city that generates its own power. We are, so we're unique in lots of different ways across the state. But the categories that we have of departments, we have 3 departments that are mostly internal services, right? So that would be human resources, the city attorney, and municipal services. Now, municipal services has some external roles that it plays. It manages, for example, the Idaho Falls Civic Center for the Performing Arts. But it's, for the most part, it's doing our accounting, property management, building maintenance, all of those kinds of things, and more, many more. Fleet, treasury, all of that, GIS, or not GIS, IT. Okay, then we have a handful of departments, 3 of them that are quality of life in nature. That would be Parks and Recreation, Community Development Services, and our library. I should note that the library, and this org chart is wrong, and that's part of the reason why I was late. I thought, well, I'll just update some of the names on there, no trouble. Well, I didn't have access to edit in PDFs. So by the time I got that straightened out, I'm hoping that my 1 week free trial of being able to have updated, PDF, whatever, PDF access, was Adobe access, won't catch up with me, and I'll end up paying the monthly fee. But anyway, sure, I'll forget to cancel. But that, plus the printer, plus not knowing how to work the editor, that's why some things are not centered properly, and why there are blanks here, and why I couldn't delete some of these boxes. So let me just explain that this org chart, the green stuff, is not right. But nevertheless, the library, you want to put an asterisk by it, because the library director is not under city control. He is under the control, Robert Wright, of the library board. The library board is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council, but we don't hire or fire the director. And that's sort of not a holdover, but a vestige of not wanting to have government be able to control books. So we provide all of those administrative support services for all of the library staff. They are city employees.
So
But
how's that related to the library district?
the library district and the library are able to work together if they so choose, but
Okay, they're not related.
not
They're
really.
not-
no,
Okay,
not related at all.
The library district is a separate tax. adjustment.
right. I just didn't know what they had to do with the library.
And then it
It's like-
contracts
it's
with
the
the
library district, so I
library.
think they.
And our library board and the library district don't always see eye to eye on library services. And so sometimes they have an agreement and sometimes they don't. All right, so then we have 2 departments, of course, that are public safety in nature, fire and police. And then we have 3 departments, for the most part, that we often refer to as enterprise funds, and 2 of those are utilities departments, but we have 5 utilities. We have fiber, we have power, we have wastewater, we have, which here it's called sewer. Again, I was not able to make all the changes that needed to be made. Sanitation and water. So, yes.
Can I just make a point? You were making the comparison with Boise earlier. Boise also doesn't do street sanitation or water.
Water.
Right, right. And that's another
That's
reason
all
why we are
privately
more
done in
complex,
Boise.
because they have the County Highway District.
They have several different water companies.
They don't plow, they don't do all of those things that we do with that. And so,
No, that's all contract.
again, we have more complexity. No, it's the County Highway District that oversees most of that. And then
But they're-
sanitation
They're
is contract.
private water, private
And many cities don't do ambulance. So we're a full service city, except for we don't have an arts and history and culture commission. But for the most part, we do everything that a city can do in Idaho. And that's why we have such a large number of employees, and it's why we have a higher tax rate. And people often will say, well, how come City of Idaho Falls taxes are so high? Well, you move somewhere else, you have to pay for all of those things separately. And if you were to aggregate all of those, you would end up with roughly the same nut, of money going out to pay for services that you pay for in the city.
So
of
do
Idaho
you have
Falls.
access to what Ada's would be if all those contract
You could figure it out.
services?
One could
were-
figure it out, but
That'd
we've
be
never
interesting.
done that because we don't have staff time to go
Yeah.
and
Well,
chase
no, that
those
sounds like
things.
a college project.
It does sound like
The
it.
the average water bill in Boise during the summer is almost $200. No?
It's $20.
So.
Yeah.
But we're very good when we are wearing our Idaho Falls power hats, and we do wear different hats. And every time we are administering a utility, we actually take off our city council or our government hats and we put on our utility hat, because we have a fiduciary responsibility to the ratepayers to do the best for the ratepayer and not to pay attention to politics or pay attention to taxes at that point. We're paying attention to rates, and that rate that we set has to be perfectly balanced. And of course, perfect is a theoretical concept, but it has to be perfectly balanced between charging too little and you don't bring in enough resource to maintain your assets, or too much and you are taking money out of people's pockets, and you are artificially inflating your savings or whatever. So you have to have that perfect balance of bringing in enough money to take care of whatever assets you have, whether those are power poles or pipes or whatever. Well, traditionally, historically, people do or water utilities have not charged enough to be able to pay for a robust replacement of water lines. And that's why it's very common in Idaho Falls to have water lines that are over 100 years old. And all pipes leak, and they leak more with time. And so we know that we're not as efficient as we could be because we have old pipes in the ground. If and when the day comes when Idaho Falls, which is the largest city that doesn't monitor in the state of Idaho, but when the day comes when we meter our water, we'll be able to track where those leaks are and become more efficient and waste less water. But that's one example of water pipes in this country are in terrible shape and are going to need to be replaced wholesale. Right now, we're seeing the country spend so much money on infrastructure, and we haven't even begun to talk about pipes in the ground. And that's going to be another probably crisis that will hit sometime before the youngest in this room die. But some of us might die before that conversation happens. But it's just an interesting thing. So utility management is serious business, and once in a while we'll encounter maybe one of you, Jim's, was with me in Boise when we were meeting in little subgroups at the AIC, Association of Idaho Cities. We have a water conference every January when we go for our legislative days. And we were in a little sub-district meeting for Eastern Idaho. And there was a city that where the commissioner, not commissioner, he was a city council member who was on overseeing their water, one of their water functions. And he said, we haven't raised our rates for 30 years. And, we kind of, our eyes got big, and all we could think was, well, your taxpayers are going to probably have to rescue that utility because there is no other way to get the money except for to take it from taxpayers. So utility management we take very seriously. And so we're trying very hard to be really good stewards. And we operate as a board for Idaho Falls Power and Fiber. We meet annually as a board for water, sewer, and sanitation. And I also lump airport in there as an enterprise fund, even though it's not really a utility, but it is one where the city taxes don't support the airport. The airport survives on taxes and fees and federal funding, and it's an enterprise fund.
Only airport in the state.
General fund dollars.
Yeah, we don't subsidize it. And we, with the airport, we this year are transitioning. We had a few years of being an airport leadership group. Now we're going to become the board. for the airport. So we are, sometimes we're bored, sometimes we're and we're managing funds that should balance. And then other times we are taxpayer administrators, which is with everything else, with the internal services, the quality of life things, and the public safety things. One of the things that's interesting about ambulance service, and maybe you have this same kind of frustration in multiple areas, but we never can charge enough to pay for it. We always have to write off hundreds of thousands of dollars to the tune of millions over time of dollars in uncollectible fees for ambulance service, just because Medicare and Medicaid will never reimburse us the full cost.
It's getting better.
Well, our management of all the other costs are getting better, but by definition, Medicare and Medicaid will never reimburse you the full amount. And so you will just never, ever have that. So taxpayers have to subsidize that service. Okay, so then the only other thing I'll tell you is that the way we organize is that I have, I guess, hiring and firing responsibility for all of the directors. Although I can't fire without the council approving. They would have to be, the majority of them would have to approve if I wanted to fire somebody. If then the council also, I think, I can't remember the rule, but they can also fire. Even,
It has to be
yeah, 6 of them.
unanimous.
Of all the
Unanimously,
council. not
they could
just the
fire if I
four.
didn't want to fire somebody. But when I hire, I still have to have council approval, confirmation of that. So we work, hand in glove on those things. But as far as the day-to-day administration goes, that's my responsibility. The city council members, though, this is a not a full-time job, and yet it could be. And that's with them only, that's with them dividing. So what happens is that we divide the council members' responsibilities across these departments, plus other committees, the MPO and RDA and a few other things. But they all then take on a few things to become specialists. And we do that every 2 years. We reorganize after every election. And so we call that being a liaison. So each council member has a chance to be a liaison for a few years to a department, and then they'll shift around. And however, Michelle has been with the airport. I think you're in your 4th year with airport. You're in your 4th year with public works. John is finishing up the 4th year with power. And it's because some of those, the expertise really helps to have that continuity. So we sometimes we'll have 2 liaisons for a difficult, or not difficult, but for a department that's huge. Other times we'll only have 1 liaison for a department that has a smaller load. So when they're the liaison, they work more closely with that director, advocate for that, advocate with an informed perspective when we're going through budget discussions. They will, sorry, I'm getting distracted. They will also be able to help to formulate a policy and carry any bills that those, or not bills, what do we call them? Ordinances or any motions that
Resolution.
need to happen in a council meeting. They'll carry that for that department. And so it's a real good way to immerse yourself without drowning under the load of being the busiest city in the state. So the specialization model, it's kind of like members of Congress are on committees. They specialize. Unfortunately for them, they don't get to move around like our council members do. But they look to each other then for their expertise. Right now, people would not really think to vote on something related to the airport if they didn't hear Michelle's perspective, because she's the one who's put in a lot of extra time to become extra informed about it. And that same goes all the way around. And so it's a good system, that specialization system, because otherwise council members couldn't keep up. There is easily for a power board meeting, 3 to 4 hours worth of reading you have to do to prepare for those once a month. For a council meeting, it can take anywhere from 1.5 hours to 5 hours to do your reading for those meetings. And so this is a tough load for for a job that we call part-time, and they only get $1,000 a month stipend. They probably,
After.
So you
Yeah.
better pay
I
the
did-
high
did-
school
did-
teachers.
by the time you take out insurance and taxes, it's nothing. It's not even grocery money.
Covers our donation.
It is a thankless job, and they work extremely hard. We have roughly 2 work sessions and 2 council meetings a month, and then a power board meeting every month. There's travel associated with power. There's travel associated with the Association of Idaho Cities. There will be some travel with airport as we start moving into a board status. There is travel associated with, can't remember now what the other one. Anyway, there's just a lot of time. These council members put in easily 20 hours a month and can do much more if they let themselves. And
There's
so.
legislative meetings,
Mhm.
AIC meetings.
Have about 5 or 6 of those a year. So anyway, just give you a little taste of what we're doing.
Okay.
Thanks, Marty.
And I appreciate all of this, looking at this, some ideas. I would like to see us get together a little more than once every 4 years.
Oh, I mean, just for the roundtable intros, but yeah.
Yeah, for the intro, and that's where I'm hoping we can focus down now on specific issues of maximize the use of everybody's time. Primarily, as I look across some of these, a lot of them are kind of administrative duties. But the ones we're interested in are the ones where the legislative issues overlap. Some of the, for example, there are ways to make our operations more efficient by sharing services. That might be a good thing to get together, say GIS with whoever's over that committee. If we can do that, I think it's the benefit of all taxpayers. But there are some bigger issues that we'd like to have everybody put their thinking hats on how are we going to deal with growth. And maybe that's one of sharing services that's more efficient that you could parse down. But when we're talking the impact of growth, I think we need to get to the point where we have some good discussions on what are the impacts when the city or municipality annexes and has a big housing subdivision, puts the traffic on roads that are not in the jurisdiction. How we're going to do that? Probably the easiest way to take another fresh look at that, because it's been a while, would be through the impact. Because I think we're talking to Brad Cramer and the second revision of the comprehensive plan, the same version of the area of impact. And things have changed since we attempted to do that 3 or 4 years ago. But the ideas like that, how can we work together to better fund streets? When we're talking about libraries, things like that, I think there's a lot of that, but just taking up a lot of extra time that we may not need to spend it on. So I don't know if it would be useful to do that today, to come up with a list of concerns, or just have everybody go back and start thinking with those guidelines. These are the things we'd like to, policies and philosophies of the city council as a legislative board, like to get together a little more often and have this discussion. A lot of that can be education like we've had today, so that you understand what we're dealing with budget-wise on an issue, and vice versa. We understand what you guys are dealing with in your organization.
To your question, I do a little better sometimes when I'm
bouncing
in a
ideas
group
off.
when the ideas are put down to, but it might remind me more than just sitting there trying to figure it out. So if we can spend a few minutes.
Well, we don't even need to do that. I think everybody's kind of got a concept, and getting together in say a quarterly meeting is what I would suggest, where we can give updates. I just use that as an example, so that the city may be aware of what's going to happen to the property tax. And there are a lot of other issues that come up along those lines, that we just share the concerns with the, on the city's opportunity to host that. You can bring up the ones that are most important to you, either individually or as a group, and vice versa.
I think we'll have to think about the individual versus group conversation, but I know for me, I would love the chance to go back and chat with staff, because we're looking really closely at how the legislature's impacted us. before I were to assert any strong ideas here today, but you've given me a lot to think about for sure.
We had quite a list that we generated
We did.
trying to do this last time around, and I sent that to you, but I
Yeah.
did not print it out for myself.
And you did not
there
send
anything-
it to me unless you sent it to the judge again.
I know, I probably only sent it to Bryon, I think, but,
I
so,
shared it with the other two.
okay, oh, so you did get it, but I didn't share it with council members as a refresh, because I just thought maybe we'd toss it out, but what kinds of things were on that list that were still viable, because some of them
That's what
probably were
we'll take
not.
a look at, because that list was quite outdated. I mean, we're talking ARPA funds, we're talking magistrate court. You know, that's something that we generated the list last time and then didn't have a follow-through plan to get together and start working on the list. You know, what's current that we want to put on the list, like that's what we're after.
Some of those were, though. I mean, some of those
Some
were
are.
issues that we need to continue with, yeah.
History.
But that could be something, you know, we bring a list of
Yeah.
how you would fire, we'll do the same thing. Get together.
I absolutely think that area impact needs to be
Yeah.
Absolutely.
one of the, early things that we get started on.
So if we could look at it won't be this long of a meeting. You know, we could probably accomplish it if everybody's prepared in an hour setting. And maybe the easiest way to do it would be to get some input on dates that you are not available. And we'll send out the Google poll.
Oh, we'll have it on those dates.
No, we'll send out the Google poll and get as many as we can on those, hopefully in about a month. And then at that time, talk about a schedule quarterly and a rotation. So,
Hopefully, we can just carve out a set time that we just do it, so that it just.
that'd be
Way
the
too much
quarterly,
sense.
Yeah.
But for the one right after the first of the year.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, it's like,
Thinking about January, or other things that you've got.
we're in Boise.
Oh,
The first
But
three
you
weeks of
probably
January
are.
are
We're
rough.
we're in Boise twice.
So if you go the last week of January, it's probably better.
And I think last week.
The 31st. we go to IC, so
We might, if you guys, are any of you, it's a council week, think about Friday the 14th.
Say we could do it early in January.
Yeah.
I prefer doing it that way.
Early's fine. Probably
14th works for us. I think.
Yeah.
There's
14 works for
nothing
me.
on our
What
calendar.
day is that?
it's a lovely day.
Friday the 14th.
Better than Friday the 13th. This is Monday the 13th.
We're not showing anything on our calendar.
Yeah, that's okay. I do have a standing meeting that goes that morning, so maybe afternoon, Friday afternoons are a little bit rough on people,
Yeah.
but
Friday,
Just up that morning, you said?
oh, what time?
it says 9 to noon, and I know it's gonna shorten, but I don't know if it'll shorten on the back end or the front end,
Could we do it at 1 that day then? That wouldn't be too bad.
or even noon, but
Or
that'd be
even
fine.
noon.
If you're gonna feed us today, we could feed you then.
Yeah, get lunch again.
Let's do it at noon then on that day.
So noon on the 14th.
It's easier than a doodle poll.
We'll probably meet here. We are, by the way, recording this. So. If we can't hear the conversations for minutes, we can send you a link to what's been recorded on the Zoom meeting.
So you want to do the Friday the 14th here and then alternate and then go to the.
Yeah, and we'll, once we finish off this portion of it, then we'll start the regular alternating.
So we have to haul lunch. No, not just-
We'll take
No,
care
it's
of
our
it.
place.
We're catering it anyway.
That's right.
Perfect.
Okay, we'll see.
Ooh.
I know you know that. Do you have something else, Mayor?
Well, I was just thinking that maybe we could still continue
Yeah.
to
well, I
identify
hope so. We can-
Oh, that's,
things for that
Let's
list.
do that while we're eating.
Yeah,
Let's discuss.
food is always a great mediator and moderator.
I heard it both ways. You have to think to identify, but if we can come up with some ideas to throw into that, that's what. Kayla, you can probably stop the recording. Well,
We'll recess.